Hello, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with artists from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Jakic. Hi, and thank you so much for joining me for episode 124. It's lovely that you feel like you'd like to listen to the Creative Matters podcast. This episode, I'm speaking with Belinda Griffiths. Belinda is a conceptual figurative artist based in Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland. Her work lies within the disciplines of painting and printmaking and explores the expressive power of the gestural mark. When coupled with depictions of the human form, this tension between mark and form has the potential to dig deeper and communicate something of the human experience that becomes instinctive and visceral. Belinda's work is an ongoing exploration of that potential. In this episode, which I absolutely enjoyed, we talk about how Belinda came to emigrate from South Africa to New Zealand at the age of 18, how she started her career in design and then made the switch to full-time artist. We discuss how she discovered printmaking and what she loves about monotypes, why she likes to create monotypes as well as paintings, and her printmaking process. We talk about the different residencies Belinda has done and how they have influenced her work, how she knows when a work is finished and successful, how she manages the push and pull between marks and form, and how she sees her process as a metaphor for her work and why she doesn't always like to share all parts of her process. Hi, Belinda.
Hello, Mandy.
It's very lovely to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you too.
And I've so enjoyed looking into your work. I just think it's absolutely riveting and very powerful, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing all about your practice and your process. So a very big warm welcome to the Creative Matters podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So you were born in South Africa?
Yeah, so I moved to New Zealand when I was 18, so my whole childhood was in South Africa, Johannesburg.
I can't really hear that in your accent.
I think when we moved, I was young enough that I picked up the New Zealand accent quite quickly. I also lived for a year in a hostel in Wellington when I was doing my design degree, and I had so many people from all over New Zealand living in the same space as me, and I think it probably I just picked it up quicker. Yeah, but now that you know, you probably hear every sort of odd word.
Yeah.
You'll be like, oh, that sounds a bit South African.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? My mum was born in South Africa and came out here when she was about 20.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she never had any accent.
Oh, right. I think also different parts of South Africa have stronger accents. So I think if you're Afrikaans speaking, then your all the vowels and the way that you speak is different as well. So it would be harder to drop the accent, or you'd hold on to the accent for longer. And then I think probably, where I was, not as strong maybe.
So as a child, were you a maker?
Yes, definitely a maker. My mother is an artist, and so she's a watercolor artist, so she was always painting, and we always had art materials around, just encouraged to draw and paint, and I've got a sister who's close to me in age, so we were always doing that sort of thing together. It was like crafting, making things. My mother was working, when we were younger, she was working on historical pictorial maps watercolor and ink, and so we would go out on a lot of like drives to get reference photos for these old houses, and then she did at one of Pilgrim's Rest, which is another town in South Africa, and so she was making one of Johannesburg and one of Pilgrim's Rest, and so we did lots of sort of trips out to take photos, and then she'd do these pen and ink drawings, pen and ink paintings, and it was always around me. We just always, it's just part of growing up. And then I did it at school, obviously, and I think in high school I had a really encouraging art teacher. I think in South Africa the way they do sort of art was quite different, and we had to kind of complete a portfolio, like a large scale A1 portfolio at the end of it, which was a bit like a folder. And I did like paintings and drawings, but the teacher set up a huge still life in the middle of the classroom of all these random bits and pieces of like bits of car parts and skulls, like animal skulls and stuff. And so we spent so many hours drawing that still life. And I think drawing is something that has ended up being a really, it comes quite naturally to me now. And I don't know whether or not that was because I, worked would draw from an early age, or if because we got that real practice in at high school, the drawing, was just a big part of what we kind of put in at the end of the year. Big drawings, and every exam there was a drawing element to it. And there seems to be more painting in high school, in college here. Yeah,
you're probably right. And were you thinking at high school that you were going to do a creative career? Was that something that you just took for granted?
Yeah, my high school teacher told me to. She told me to marry a rich man and paint for the rest of my life.
Oh my God!
That's what she told me. Which at first, I think I ended up, my first course that I did was art and advertising, and it was kind of designed to feed into an advertising career. So you did a lot of storyboarding and advertising kind of layout and that sort of thing. And so I did that for a year, and that was what I ended up choosing, and did that for a year before we immigrated. So that was in South Africa, yeah.
And what brought you to New Zealand?
I think it was just our whole family immigrated, and at the time, my father was working in human resources, and he could see a bit of sort of upheaval in South Africa. And we were three girls. I've got two sisters, and my mum was just like, looking forward into our futures. I think she just wanted a bit more kind of security for us, and then we had this opportunity to immigrate, and it was probably a good time, because my sister had finished studying and I was in the middle of my studies, and my younger sister was just about to go into high school, I think. So
good time. And did you go to university here when you got here?
I did a year in Wellington. I did a year of the visual communications degree there, which was really good, and they had great drawing classes. And my first opportunity to do life drawing, and just really great tutors. And then at the end of that year, I think I was finding it quite odd because my family had settled in Auckland, and I was realizing that I wasn't settling anywhere. I'd go home for holidays and feel like I was less at home in Auckland than Wellington, and then I'd go back to Wellington. It was getting a bit odd, and so I was like, I think I need to settle in Auckland and just find my feet in one place. And so I finished my degree, and I did a Bachelor of Graphic Design, and I majored in illustration, and so I did that at AUT.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow. So drawing does really underpin your practice?
Yeah, definitely. I knew I could draw, and I knew I could do that. And so, and I'd started doing a bit of painting as well. And and so I knew if I could find something that had a bit of that in, a job that brought that into it.
And you felt like you needed to get a real job and didn't actually consider being an artist?
I think because I started studying in South Africa. In South Africa, it's a bit different. I think you just there's so many people that you, if you've got an opportunity to study, you study something that that will guarantee you a job
and make you money
and make you some money. I never really thought about fine arts as an option in South Africa. I don't know why. Yeah, so it wasn't something that I thought about until I was doing my design, until I was in doing like AUT, and some of my friends who were doing the design degree were also painting at the same time and looking at galleries. And at that stage I thought, oh, that's an interesting idea. That would be an ideal solution, but not a solution, but ideal situation. But I still don't see how it would work. In a practical sense. So I just kept going with, and I was enjoying design, and I enjoyed the idea of doing illustration as well, especially. And so I still thought, oh, okay, that might be a good avenue to go down. Yeah.
So you became a graphic designer, and were you actually still working on your own work at that point?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I was thinking about this the other day. I was teaching a life drawing class in the evenings, and when I started design, and I was still painting paintings, even though we had this tiny little unit. Yeah, I was still doing a bit of painting, and then as I was kind of working, because I worked in magazine design at ACP Media for a bit, New Zealand Home and Entertaining, which is now Home magazine, and a lot of architecturally designed homes, and a lot of design elements and beautiful ceramics and glassworks and stuff. I'd go home and paint in the evenings. So, but it was magazine design is full on, and it's quite a demanding design role. So it didn't feel like I had a lot of creative energy, and so to kind of put into my own work, and so eventually I found a design job that I could do for half a week, and then do my painting for the rest of the time. And that was an intentional move that I made, because I'd realized that I really did want to be painting and making work. So I made that shift, and that was a really important shift to make, because it allowed me to have more, definitely time, but that headspace to be making work, which I've definitely in the design world, and especially in the magazine design world, it's constant, the deadlines. And so you don't actually have that space to think or contemplate or, put into that. It's a different headspace. Yeah.
And that must have been quite a sort of pivotal moment really in your life, starting to think of yourself as an artist as well as a designer.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And in a lot of ways, I've always thought of myself as an artist, but didn't really give myself permission to do it as a full-time career, I suppose, until that point where I was doing it. Probably, I'd say, 70% of the time I was kind of giving to art, and it was amazing once I'd made that decision. Opportunities presented themselves, and that, and it kind of fed off each other. It's interesting once you kind of take that leap. But it was only really because to take that leap when I was married to my husband by then, and we could look at the, our incomes and, realistically going forward, how we were going to do this together. Yeah, so.
And that was 2005?
Yes, somewhere around there. Yeah, it was about 2005.
Yeah.
When I started working kind of part-time, and then, so there were a couple of years which were really important in establishing kind of contacts with a couple of galleries and actually getting work done that I could build up. I had a website that I'd put together, and just made work and got it out there and shared it enough that I could get feedback on it and actually feel like I'd made the right decision. Then in 2007 my son was born, and it actually worked really well for us because I had a few shows that I could work towards while he was little, and kind of work between his sleeps and all that sort of thing, but still keep a thread going through my practice, which I needed at that time, but also meant that I could be involved in exhibitions that would go forward as they grew, as my children grew as well. And also around that time, we bought my printing press, which I'd never done any printmaking before. I think we went to a show in Christchurch of an artist called Jason Grieg, and he did monotypes. And I didn't actually know what they were, but I looked at the show and was fascinated by these. They were prints, and so I looked them up and found out they were monotypes, and I was like, I want to make those. And then I saw a printing press for sale on Trade Me, and we bought it, and that was exciting, even though I didn't know how to use it. But I just played with it and read up on monotypes and found out how to make them, and just kept making, and Flynn would go to sleep for his daytime nap, and I'd go downstairs and I'd start playing, and then I'd hear him start like waking up, and I'd have to clean up because it was all oil-based inks. And I very quickly changed to water-based inks and changed my process because it wasn't just to make it easier, but it was a perfect kind of thing to make in short bursts of time. Monotypes are painterly and quick and spontaneous kind of works that, well, the way I do them anyway. And so, yeah, it worked really well, and it was small, and I could learn a lot through working on them. In those kind of short bursts of time. Yeah.
You did well to be actually making while you had a small child. It's not always easy. And no. were your works quite similar to the work that you're making now?
There are definite similarities. I think there are certain things that carry through my work that have always carried through my work. I really am drawn to monotone works, and I've always been drawn to monotone works. The figure has most often is in my work and has always been. I just find the figure to be, it's challenging, but it's also feels like it has that connection. If I'm talking about emotions, or if I'm trying to paint about or make a work that talks about the human experience, I don't know, just how we are and how we feel. Portraying a human form in the work just seemed to be, it was like a conduit for emotions that I was trying to portray. And anyway, it just always felt like a good subject for me to tackle. And
it was a necessary part of what you
Yeah.
were trying to communicate.
yeah. So it was something that, I just always worked with, and in different ways. But also I think it suited, like the monotype suited my way of working gesturally. Like I just have always worked quite loose, and the monotype, you have to kind of work before it dries on the plate. You have to kind of move the paint around before it dries too much. And I love that challenge of actually getting the work down in a really minimal, economical way. Like the less marks for me, the better. I don't know. It's bizarre, but just it's just in a way it's a challenge for me to can I capture this figure, and that overlay of marks feels like it's the overlay of emotion as well. So if I can get that really loose gestural mark and I can get it really fluid and and almost subconscious in a way, not overly, not too fussy. If I can get it loose and gestural, then it adds that extra emotion onto that work.
And the monotype, is it the same as monoprint?
It's not. For ages I thought it was, but it's the difference between a monoprint and a monotype is that a monoprint has some sort of matrix on the plate that will stay constant if you're working on a series, say. So you might have a sort of a scratched element, or an etching into the plate, and so if you did a series, that would recur exactly in the same place for all that series of works. You might do like other stuff and around that one fixed element, those would be monoprints. But monotypes, you're basically wiping it clean and you're working from scratch every time.
Wow. And the process for that kind of printmaking, can you talk us through that?
Yeah. So monotypes, I suppose everybody approaches them in different ways. But for me, I don't often use a brayer, which is where a lot of people would start their process from, sort of inking up a brayer. I ink up a brush and work with a brush, and I put down the marks onto the plate, and then work back. So I've put the marks down and then I pull back the light. And so the light elements of, say, shadow on the face, or, light falling on the face, that's what I'll pull back. So I kind of work backwards. Yeah.
You use a rag for that?
Yeah. Rags. I go through so many rags.
But you do.
Yeah.
And what's the actual ink or paint that you use?
So when I do monotypes, I'm actually working with, when I first started, I used ink, like printmaking ink. And then because I'm a painter and a printmaker, and with my painting, I use golden acrylic, like a slow drying, I think it's open golden acrylic. Because I used that with my painting, I became so familiar with it as a medium that I actually wanted to use it in printmaking as well. So I started playing with it in the printmaking and when I was doing my monotypes as well, and found that it worked just as well. So I just stick with that and just work it, in a very similar way. I think I use a bit of the golden retarder, which is just slows down that drying process a bit more. So I have a bit more time.
And then you transfer onto paper?
Yeah, so then I've got my big old press, which is like an antique. So, it's big and heavy, and it's got quite a wide bed, so I can get quite big prints out of it. So you just pop the plate down onto the paper or the other way around, depending on what way you want to do it, and then put it through. And depending on how long you've spent on the paint, ink, whatever, it does different things. And you can sometimes get a ghost print with a second print, but it's basically one print. And
Then you clean the plate. Wow. And the plate's like Perspex or something?
Like just an acetate sheet or Perspex.
That's amazing. And it feels very much like a painting process, but you're taking a print.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a big difference between the prints that you create and your paintings?
Yeah, often I get asked the question, why not just paint on the paper? But I think the difference for me with a painting and a print is, well, definitely with a print, because you're working on acetate sheet, it's so smooth that you can do a lot of the wiping back easier. And it has a different quality. The paint kind of smushes around a bit more. And so when you're doing gestural brush strokes, it just slides. It's more fluid. And so there's that with the monotypes. That's what I love about the monotypes. Also because generally you're working with monotypes, you might be working on paper, and it just feels like it's less serious. So you're working on multiples, or you're working on a series, and you just kind of get into a rhythm, and you can just it's almost like, oh, if this works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not serious. So you don't get too hung up on it. And I think that's a really important thing about gestural work. And I found that with a series that I did called for a show called Mono. It was really important for me to kind of find a rhythm. But it's the more relaxed you are with the work, the more fluid and gestural and more successful the work will be. So it's kind of it's a head game. You kind of have to commit but not commit to the work. You've got to hold on to it loosely.
Yeah, I can understand that. It must be quite sort of liberating in some ways. And do you sometimes just take the paint off the plate and start again?
Yeah. Well, while you're working on it, you can kind of see whether or not it's going to be successful or not. And so you can go, oh, no, that's really not going to work, or I've put too much paint on the plate and it's going to squelch and it's going to ruin the sort of fine lines or whatever. You can take it off, take it back. And then sometimes you think, oh, this isn't going to work, and you put it through and it does something interesting. So you kind of got to go with it.
That's the lovely thing about printmaking. Sometimes some little surprises happen
in
the printmaking process, and it can be a nice little gift.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's fun about printmaking, definitely.
Yeah,
the
I love
surprise.
that. And then other times you just paint like a painter?
Yes. So that's been a huge part of my practice as painting. And I started off painting on canvas and for years did paintings on canvas. And in a similar way, the monotype, the gestural mark making and monotone and
figurative.
Yeah, figurative. But it wasn't the brush strokes at first. I remember I was thinking about this the other day. The brush strokes, at first, I was trying to kind of not see them. I didn't want to see the brush strokes, and I was still loose, and it was still kind of fluid. But I remember the lines when you use a brush. I didn't want to see those, so that's kind of evolved. I've become so interested in the brush strokes and being able to see the movement of the brush in the works now. That surprises me now that when I think back. But yeah, I was looking for different things in the works originally. So over the years, canvas and then onto board, And then I started working on paper because I think I was familiar with working with paper, with the monotypes, and that really being able to work on paper and knowing that it freed me up a lot. I thought it might be interesting to take that into paper, working on paper with my paintings. And so I started doing paintings on paper, but on a really thick paper, like it's almost card. It's like 650 GSM. So it doesn't buckle when you paint on it. And it takes a lot, I can sand it and do all the things that I normally might do on a board. And then I mount it. When I'm happy with the pieces, I might choose a series and then I mount them onto board. And I sort of bond the paper to the board and then I frame that. So that means that I've still got that that kind of relaxed approach to whether the painting will work out or not. I'm more experimental. I'm more, I explore the work more, and I'm more kind of relaxed about it, and that's those works will ultimately be more successful, often because of that. And so I ended up doing a lot of works on paper that way, and then putting them onto board so that they still have that. They still, I can still frame them. And I think because a lot of people who work on paper end up framing the works behind glass. That technique of just mounting the paper onto board took that away. Because I can varnish over the paper and put layer upon layer of medium to kind of seal it. And so, but there isn't that glass between the work and the viewer.
Yeah. How do you actually attach the card to the board?
It's just with media, like I think it's the same medium as I use basically it's the soft. I think you can use any medium, but I use the soft gel golden medium.
Yeah.
And it's just a really thick coat of that onto the board. And then you place the artwork on it and you just push out all the air bubbles, and then you weigh it down for like 24 hours. So you have to make sure that it's got a good weight on it, and you have to make sure that all the air bubbles are out, and you have to like leave a little bit over the edge so you can trim it really, carefully at the end.
That sounds beautiful. I love that idea. It's not that common, is it really?
No, when I first thought of it, I had to kind of look it up and because I had to find some way of working that suited my process. But yeah, I think I did a bit of searching online and found people who were mounting watercolor paintings onto board that way. And
that's very cool. And is it something that you've done all the way through since then? And are you still doing that kind of process with your small works?
Yeah, I still work that way, definitely. Yeah, it's just if I'm working with paper and want it ultimately to be on board, then that's how. If I'm wanting to kind of display it or sell it or put it into a gallery show, that's usually how I'll do it. Yeah.
And the monotypes are put onto board as well?
Monotypes I have done, over the years. And sometimes I'll just supply them to the gallery, just works on paper, because some people just like buying works on paper and framing them themselves, and so that's fine as well. So just depends on where it's going and what it's going to be, what it needs to be displayed as. And
yeah. So, Belinda, we've got so much to talk about. We were talking about it before we started recording. There's probably 4 hours at least, which we will try not to get to that record-breaking time. But I guess, you've had a lot of exhibitions and you've had residencies, and you've done some really interesting things with different series of works. So maybe if we just choose some in particular that we could talk about. So I would love to start with the residency you did in 2014 in Canada, which sounded really intriguing. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So when I was looking for a residency, my children were really small. So my daughter was 3 and my son was 7, and I just really wanted to sort of change my environment and work on something new. And so I'd started looking for a residency. And at the same time, I'd been to an artist talk, and the speaker mentioned that you can't be an artist and a mother at the same time, a serious artist and a mother. And I mean, I knew that was just an opinion, and but it got me thinking about that as a subject. And so when I applied for my residency in Winnipeg, in Canada, I was looking for an artist residency that I could bring my children with me to, and 2, when I looked into it and I found the organisation MAUA, which is Mentoring Artists for Women's Art in Winnipeg, I knew it would be a good fit because they had a group within the organisation that were parents and artists, mothers and artists, and so when I applied for the residency, I put forward that I'd be wanting to kind of talk with these, with these women and explore this idea further. That was really interesting to me. I think in New Zealand, I had a few artists that I knew who were mothers, so I just really wanted to kind of have those conversations. But not many, so yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we all packed up and headed off to Winnipeg. And I was also wanting to, so part of the plan was that I was going to interview these lovely ladies, and while I was interviewing them, I videoed them as well, and I took stills of them talking about their lives and their work and their families and their just the things that they found challenging about being a mother and an artist, and the good things and the bad things and the hard things and the easy things, and then I did like a monotype print of the stills, and that was part of the show at the end when I was finished. I could have done anything really there in terms of, I could have just stopped at the interviews and that would have been enough. But for me, I had this amazing chunk of time that I didn't normally in my day-to-day life was a real challenge because my kids were a certain age. And so I really wanted to make the most of that. And so I set myself this challenge of interviewing, all these people, and then working on a series of prints from that. And it was interesting because up until that point, I'd done some monotypes, but I hadn't done them in that gestural way, the really gestural loose way, which I did for that show. And before we left, I was sitting down with my daughter doing a craft, and we were doing kind of really basic monotypes on like plastic ice cream lids. And because I didn't have a brayer for her, we just used paintbrushes and little cubes of paper and just some of those really like loose monotypes that we made were really interesting to me, and I was like, that's something to explore in there. And it just impressed on me, like afterwards, while I was thinking about it, how important that play, that element of play is in your practice, because it's there where you find those amazing discoveries in terms of, I've never done that before in that way, and that's really interesting, and I want to pursue that. And they're always at the most unlikely times. So it's
and just having time to actually devote yourself to experimenting and playing and trying stuff out, and just for the fun, or the valuing the process, not actually trying to make something with an end result.
Yeah. So those discoveries were really important and pivotal, even though, it's not when you think they're going to necessarily happen. But that was the technique that I kind of kept going while I was in Winnipeg, and it was easy to take with me, because all I had to take was my paintbrush and my tube of paint and my little acetate sheet, or whatever it was, the Perspex sheet, and some paper, and which made it very portable and very easy, and
And they were quite monochromatic. Was it just a black that you were using?
Yeah, I did bring a red, just in case I was going to, change it up a bit, but it was black, black, and maybe I think I did add in some of them a little touch of red, but you wouldn't notice that.
What black do you like to use?
I use Mars black. Is that the one that's got a bit of warmth in it?
Mm-hmm.
And I often add a bit of like a brown, depending on an umber, or over the years I've added different kind of warming browns, but just I like a warm brown. It feels like, to me, this sort of sepia kind of tone just is a bit more I think the warm tones make it more approachable in some ways.
And they're really beautiful. They're all in a rectangle within the rectangle of the paper, which is really lovely and makes such a lovely collection all lined up like that. Do you think they were very recognisable, and how did the women feel about the work?
They weren't. I think that some of them were more recognisable than others, and I think some of them were. I really wanted the movement in there because the women were so passionate about what they were talking about, and the things that they were talking about were meant so much to them, and so there was, I wanted to bring that across as well. It wasn't just about, and it's very seldom with my work is it about likeness. I think so much of it is about the mark and the looseness of the mark. So they have to kind of compete a lot of the time, but those were loose and intentionally loose. And I didn't even put a name on each one. I just put them up, and I think when they came to see them, it was, they probably did do a bit of, I think this one's me. But I think they were looking at it also, being artists themselves, I probably.
Yeah, they got it.
Yeah.
And are you're expressing their emotions and their story, but are you bringing your own emotions through the work as well?
Oh, definitely. I think for that series especially, I think because there was so much, when I was having the conversations with the women, I was learning from their experiences as well. And I think just the opportunity, and it was, it's a real privilege to talk to them and to be the chance to have those conversations. And they were really honest with me and really open about their lives. And there's so much to learn from them. And so it was definitely emotions from both sides, definitely.
Yeah, and you can see that. I mean, that's a very integral part of your work, isn't it? Is you expressing emotion, your own emotions in some way. Yeah, that definitely comes through. And those works, were they for sale, or did you give them to the women, or what happened with that?
Some of them I gave to the women. and some of them I brought home with me. I ended up, they weren't for sale. That was never part of it. The whole organisation, the whole residency, they didn't expect anything from me for it. They're very supportive as an organisation for supporting women in Winnipeg. That was part of why they bring in an international artist, is to feed the women in the community as well, and the artists in the community. And so it was just the experience, the enriching experience that they want to kind of offer. And so for both the artists coming and for the people in the organisation. And actually wrote an article when I got back. I was asked by, I think it was Art News magazine, asked me to write an article about the whole experience. And so I could put some of those images and along with some photos of the whole thing together for that article.
That's so good. And did you find the residency, well, obviously it was a really positive experience for you, but do you feel like it had quite an influence on your work, and how did it go for your family? Two questions there. Two questions in one.
It definitely, it had I think it gave me that the chance to work on pieces where I think that I really respond well to a situation where I don't have to, the work doesn't have to go anywhere in particular or be for sale for something in particular, because it kind of, and it doesn't, there's no expectations attached to those works. And so it gave me an insight into actually doing those, like that kind of series of works in that way, which, I think definitely I took into the next stage of making that, led on from there. Your second question, how was it for my family? We travelled a bit after the residency because we had come so far, and it was, my husband had been to Canada before, and so we did a bit of travel, which I think that part they really enjoyed. I think it was a challenge for my husband because he was looking after the kids, and he for the time that I was in the studio, and we didn't have all our normal sort of setup and all their toys and school and all those things. So, but he's really supportive in that way. So he knew that it was important to me, and and the kids are so adaptable. My daughter doesn't remember anything of the experience, but my son does. And we got to see a lot of really interesting things and go and visit people that my husband knew from his previous travels. And it was just a cool experience all round. But
that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
such a good thing to do for artists, isn't it, to have a residency if you can work it out?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a lot of residencies that offer that whole being able to bring your family and have children there. I mean, maybe more and more, but you do find that your choices are limited. So when you find a residency that is so supportive, it's it's an amazing thing, really.
Yeah, it's great. It's a fantastic opportunity. So I'm sure that when you got home from that residency in Canada, there were lots of things that influenced your practice, and things that you got out of that, as you said.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about the Train of Thought exhibition, which was in 2015, which I'm very drawn to. I find the whole concept really interesting. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so that all came from it was like I'm trying to think of the word. It was a residency that was organised by Fiona Cable from Railway Street Studios. She approached me and she said, "Do you want to do a different kind of residency in that they approach a business and invite an artist into the business environment, so that you're working in, doing your own thing, and it can influence the employees in the business, and it's a two-way thing where it changes the environment of the
that's
business.
Interesting. It's different, isn't it?
It was really interesting, and I thought, why not? And so for me to get into the city, because I live on sort of out in the Wop-Wops, I have to catch a train, and so I'm always interested in observing people, and so for the train trip from where I lived into the city, because that was where the residency was, it was right in the middle of the city. I spent a lot of time observing the people on the train, and in this train station, and just watching people, and so when I got, and I do like shots of just general crowds, or just general, sort of in the cabin as I walked into the train, and then I'd use those images as kind of reference once I got to the residency. And I just had a little corner in the main area where everybody worked, and I would set up my easel and just work on little studies of that trip, basically, and pull out whatever I wanted, kind of, and it was really loose and really kind of fluid and quick studies. But I found it really fun, and just a good experience.
And those works, they're very powerful, and they really, again, that sort of emotion really comes through. You can sort of feel what the person is feeling. Like, it's really, they're very provocative, I think. And I love the different people that you've captured, and their different poses and body language, and what they could be expressing. It would be interesting to see if anyone actually recognised themselves if they ever saw that work. But it is quite. There's quite a lot of realism in those ones.
There is, yeah. I think also it's interesting when you're observing people on a train, because it's kind of enough time for people to, if they weren't on their phones, a lot of people kind of zone out because you're not driving, you're just sitting. And I found it interesting, and that's why I called the whole exhibition Train of Thought, because I'm just really interested in capturing people in moments of honesty or vulnerability. The point where they kind of, they're doing sort of internal searches, they're reflecting on things. And so those moments are really interesting to me. And so when you're on a train, people zone out and start thinking, or waiting for a train. You don't have control over the situation. You sort of, there's an element of surrender in waiting for a train, or waiting for the train to arrive at its destination. And so you have to just be, I think that was what I ended up capturing, and because I was capturing people in that moment, probably those features come through. But I don't know, some of them might be quite recognizable, but it's never really something that I'm focused on, so I don't know that people will.
No, but they're beautiful portraits. Do you think of them as portraits?
I don't usually call my work portraits. I usually just talk about the human form or the human figure in them. But they would be portraits because they are figurative. I mean, like figures, but Yeah.
You don't see it like that.
I think, when people call them portraits, I often assume they are thinking about the likeness element or the, recognizable features. And sometimes my works are, because it's just by chance, but it's not necessarily something that I try to get when I'm working with reference images.
It's really the emotion that you're transferring.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also things like light and like I said, mentioned before, is if you've put down a mark, kind of being able to retain some of that mark in its pure form without altering it too much. And so it's always a bit of push and pull with that, because sometimes I put down a mark and I just don't want to disturb it at all. But then, I know that I'm trying to kind of pull out a figure in it. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what if I just pull out this tiny element of light on the cheekbone? How much can I still get with this? How much of this figure can I still portray without
messing with
that beautiful mark that's just like, happened by chance or whatever. So it is that push and pull, and it's really interesting because of what sometimes wins more than others. And
it's like a little fight between the gestural mark and the
and the form.
Yeah,
definitely.
Which is such an interesting thing in itself, isn't it? And it has an element of abstract and realism and mark making all kind of working together.
Yeah. And it's because I love all those elements as much in terms of, being able to work with them. It's always that push and pull and that tension. And maybe that tension is what people really connect with. I don't know. I don't know what it is in terms of when you're making the work, that point where it works. I can see when I feel like, okay, this is a successful work. But I often wonder kind of if I left it, 3 steps back where you couldn't really see the figure, would that be quite interesting? Or and I often think that if I've overdone a work, if I'd put too many recognizable marks into it in terms of bringing the form out, and that feels overdone to me. So there's a real line. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah. And what do you think it is for you that makes it feel finished or makes it feel successful?
I think it's a combination of a balance of tones and a balance of kind of composition, but it's also for me is just if there's not anything that's glaringly obvious that I need to work on or change or fix or pull back or put in, or if it all works together, I know you don't want to change anything, and it's ready, and you can kind of step back from it and go, okay, you're done. And sometimes it comes together so quickly, and you're like, oh, okay, is that it? Okay, I've got to step back. And sometimes it needs a few visits in terms of like layers or additions or tweaks, but. You kind of know when there's nothing else that's glaringly obvious and you really need to.
Yeah, which is quite lovely, isn't it, when you're not exactly sure how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
When you start.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely for me, my work, I will never know, and I can't ever do the same work twice because the marks will be doing different things, and the wiping back will do different things, and the marks that are left behind will be different. So I don't even try and do the same work twice. I might use reference material from the same series, but and so that works will always be different anyway. But it's just you just never know what you're going to get. But I think that's the appeal of it for me, is that I need to be surprised by the work that I make, because that's what keeps it interesting, and, and curiosity about what it's going to do. Just, you never know.
And you talked about your monotype print process. Can you talk to us a little bit about your painting process and how you feel about sharing that?
I was thinking about that and about, a lot, because my work is very process oriented, and it's a lot of the work, for me, a lot of the process is quite personal. It's developed over many years, and I'm experimenting a lot with the process, and there's so much trial and error and so much learning that goes along with it, that it feels so close to me. And so a lot of the time I feel like I need to hold on to it for longer while I'm resolving it, or I'm discovering it, and I'm kind of uncovering it, all its potential. So when people ask me about my process and how I did something or how I made something, I can't always give them an answer, or sometimes I suppose I keep some of it to myself, because I find it so much a part of my concept, or part of my process, that that it just feels personal in a lot of ways. So I do share parts of my process, but some of it I just keep to myself.
Which is great. It's good to acknowledge that that's where you're at with that.
Yeah, I think as artists we do a lot of exploring and fine-tuning processes, and I think it's important to be able to share processes, for sure, but it's also important to guard some of our processes as well, because we do spend a lot of time working them out for ourselves and fine-tuning them. And I just think that it's part of what we do, and it's part of how we make that work. And
and it's not really about giving up your trade secrets and somebody might copy you. It's a lot deeper than that, isn't it?
Yeah, well, as I make my work, a lot of the time the technique that I'm using mirrors the concept in a lot of ways, and so that the process runs alongside the idea behind the work. So I've done works in the past which were all about water, like a watershed moment, and I'd use watercolor for that, or ink, and the drip was important part of it. And in my show that I did, and we'll probably talk about it more in a bit, I was making paint skins, because I was transferring paint from a plastic sheet onto board, and just the act of making a paint skin felt so human to me, because there was, as you transfer the paint skin, it might overlap, or it might buckle and tear. And it was I think I was doing the show for Phone Ender Galleries, and they and it was just after lockdown. I'm trying to think if I'm muddling up times, but anyway, and it was at a real point where we had, lockdown and COVID and all that sort of thing had been quite kind of disorienting, and this act of being quite tender with the works, and having to sort of smooth things out and layer things up, and just part of that process was the materials I was using, and the process that I was doing became the metaphor behind the work. So it was kind of processes metaphor was something that I often talk about, because it really is part of the ideas behind my work.
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It's amazing. And how do you communicate that with your audience, or do you feel like you need to?
I think that's what, sometimes I might talk about it in my, if I'm putting together a show, I might talk about it, but also some of it is just part of my process. And I love seeing those kind of parallels that happen while I'm making the work. And so a lot of the time, the making for me is the research. So working with the materials is the research, and the discoveries that I make from starting a work, and then it'll move on to the next part of the work. And so those discoveries, I feel like, are my little, discoveries along the way. They're not necessarily going to interest anybody at the end, but they're just part of the joy of the making, I suppose.
So beautiful. Wow, you're so eloquent. I mean, you do actually speak really beautifully about your work. In 2017, you were part of a show called Mono, the Painterly Print, and you also were involved with curating that show.
Yes, that was I love that show. That was, it was an idea that came to me. It was after my residency and both of the residencies, but I just, the joy of monoprints, monotypes, and what I knew was happening out there with different artists doing different things in their monoprint realm. I just think it's a medium that is not explored enough, or maybe it is and I just haven't seen it out there, but I just wanted to introduce the beauty of the monotype to people on a big scale. And I just was like, okay, what can I do? And I knew a few artists that were doing beautiful monotypes, and I did a bit of research, and I contacted John Pusateri, who is a printmaker, and he runs the Auckland Print Studio, and asked him if he would be interested in doing it. He was keen, and he was working with Duncan Pepe Long, who is also a printmaker, and he was doing beautiful work as well. And so, and he was keen. And then I contacted an artist called Neela Glass, who I'd seen work online of hers, but I'd never met her before. And then John said to me, "Oh, do you want me to contact Jason Grieg?" And I'd mentioned Jason Grieg before, and he was, I don't even know, I think he lives in South Island, but John said to me, I'll contact him because he likes his own space. He doesn't talk to many people. So yeah, he contacted him, and he was keen. And so I had this amazing group of artists who were going to do something adventurous with a monoprint and or a monotype. And I kept it really loose, in terms of what to produce. But, it was up to them. But I just thought, if we can keep it monotone, that was kind of the mono thing. If we keep it monotone and just do something big and adventurous, and it was really fun. And we had the space. So I approached the Franklin Art Gallery out south. The proposal that I put forward to them was that, this is a way for this community to see monotypes on in their own area. They don't have to go into because it's probably one of my local galleries out that way, and just nice for them to have a show. That would otherwise probably be more central.
Yeah.
So I I had to put a proposal through to them, but they liked the idea, and so so we basically all just worked on our own work by ourselves and then brought it together for the show. I think John was in America when the show happened, so he dropped off his works before he left, but everybody else brought their works on the day, and I worked with the exhibition manager at the Franklin Arts Gallery. It's called the New Zealand Steel Gallery, the actual gallery in that space. It's a bit confusing, and it all came together really well, and we got lots of good feedback from the community, and it's just a really fun show to put together. And so for that show, I did a series of large-scale monotypes. It was as big as my printing press could do. And because I was wanting to, I had this idea where I wanted to kind of move from a really abstracted figure to a more recognizable figure. But I wanted it to be really organic and not overthink it. So I just got a stack of paper. I think it was about 50 sheets of paper, possibly even more. And I just created these gestural head kind of shapes. But because I was working one after the other, the form of the head became more and more kind of assured in my mind as I worked. And so the gesture became more loose and fluid. And I knew that the shape of the figure was in there somewhere, and it just all kind of came together. And then at the end, I put out all 50. Once I'd finished all of them, I mean, I don't know how many weeks it was of work, but I put all 50 out and selected 10 of them. And those are the ones that ended up in the show. And I needed them to talk to each other. I needed them to kind of feel like they were progressing, but each one be completely unique in their own way and be really convincing in terms of it had a human element to it, but the mark making was interesting, and there was movement and gesture and all those interesting things happening. So
it's such a beautiful collection. It's very striking. And then was it all figurative or from the other artists?
No. So John did a series. I think I can't even remember how many of them were. I should know because we had to put them up. And they were moths, I think they were. And he did this amazing series of moths that were sort of symmetrical. So they were a bit like those drawings that you do as a kid. You paint on one side and then and so they were symmetrical, but the mark making was so beautiful. And so he did a series of moths, and the whole wall was taken up with them.
Wow.
I might have to give you a photo so you can post it up to see that one as well, because it was a beautiful collection of works. And I think he did a few other ones on the side as well. I can't remember how many, and then which weren't moths. And then Neela did this series of works that were, I think she used fabric and printed the actual fabric, but big, huge swaths of fabric, beautiful work. And so you ended up with just white paper with the form of the fabric flowing through.
Wow.
And Duncan did long, tall works, which were figures. And I think there might have been 2 of them side by side. And they were really beautiful. He does beautiful, really subtle tones in his mono. He's also a painter. He's like a portrait painter, and very, very clever. And so, those subtle tones of the figures and the sort of skin tones, even though they were monotone, they really come through in his work. And then Jason did these like framed works of a range of different sizes of these he does almost kind of mythical beings that are quite not of this world,
That must have been quite an interesting experience for you, coming up with the show concept and making the proposal and being part of the show as one of the artists, and then having some say on who was in the show and then putting it all together. That must have been quite amazing.
Yeah, it was actually. I really enjoyed the whole process, and just also getting to know the artists more and I think also part of it, we did a workshop as part of it. I think with these public art shows, it often has a public program that runs alongside, and through the workshop, I got to meet lots of the local artists and the community, and and so actually through that, I met an artist called Melanie Arnold, who I then went and did a few shows with, which we can talk about. But yeah, it's amazing who you meet when you get involved in these things. And artists often, as you probably have spoken about before, are all by themselves in their studios working away. And so actually to branch out and meet other artists and to work with them and collaborate or do interesting shows with them, it's actually something that I find really rewarding and enjoyable about being an artist. Yeah.
Is that something you think you'd like to do again?
Well, I've done it since that show. We have done a few shows in a similar fashion and doing working together and putting a show together. And I enjoy the process of public art shows. I find really interesting because there isn't that sales element to it, and so you can be a bit more kind of experimental, and you can push the boundaries a bit more. It's not about making a work that's going to fit on someone's wall necessarily. It's going, you can just find solutions for displaying your work which suit the space, or suit the environment, or suit the mood of this place. And so you're thinking in a different way. Yeah.
Which would be quite refreshing.
Yeah.
And is it something that anyone can do, come up with a proposal and approach a public gallery?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think they put out calls for, proposals. I think they do it probably about a year in advance. So you do have to have a plan, or be thinking about things that you might want to put forward ahead of time, and then put that through. And a lot of the galleries are open to talking about the process as well, in terms of helping you through creating that proposal. And it's really just, I think it does help to have a few artists. I think that the public art, depending on the space and depending on the gallery, but they want a show which will be a really interesting thing for the community to visit and to see and to learn from. And so they're thinking about the schools and the and different art groups, different groups in general. And so they're keeping in mind a lot of things. So it's important, I suppose, for the artist, if you're thinking of putting a proposal, to keep that in mind as well. But yeah, I think as well with these proposals, you do have to be prepared for that it might not go through and it might not happen. So keeping a little notebook of ideas is quite handy, because one, you don't know when the proposal, when they're going to put out the call for proposals, and how long, the sort of time is for the deadline, before the deadline. So it's just, and then you can kind of carry it over. If you don't get accepted into one, you can carry it over. Because that's one of the things that I think is quite hard about being an artist, is always is having to create those proposals, or writing those proposals, and then not necessarily getting accepted for them, because you don't get accepted for a whole lot of them, ones that you put forward for, and then just keeping going, keeping on putting those proposals through,
and not sort of becoming discouraged.
Yes, you've just got to keep putting it out there and trying. But
it's like the funding.
Yes,
the same sort of thing. So much work and love and blood, sweat and tears, and then when nothing comes of it, it can be so disheartening. And then, you've got to pick yourself up again and off you go, which all that sort of mental talking to that you have to do. It's like, it's okay, all that stuff can be exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. And and fine tuning those proposals and or grant applications or whatever, and actually you come up with some really good ideas or some really good thoughts about why it's relevant and what you can use it for, and you get excited about them to the point where you actually I could do this, or I can make this, I could put this into practice, and then to get rejected for that, it's like, oh, okay, right, I'm not going to be doing that, and then you've almost done it in your head.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's a very interesting one, which a lot of us have to deal with. So, as I said earlier, we could keep talking and talking and talking. We are going quite nicely for the 4-hour mark, but no, not quite. So I'd really like to hear about the 2019 Karikari residency, and Karikari is on the west coast of Auckland. It'd be interesting to hear about how that was in comparison to the one in Canada, and what that was all about. Yeah,
so that I think it was their second year of running the Karikari residency by the time I got to apply, and for me, I think I had an idea what I wanted to do while I was there. I had visited the residency once before, I think, when they were introducing it as an idea, and so I knew where it was and the beautiful spot that it was in, and it was all very inspiring. Just visiting it, I think I needed to be sure that it was going to work for the whole family once again, because my children are at an age where, that's, it wasn't going to work to be, to divide up the family and for me to be there by myself. So it had to work. And so there was a bit of fine tuning that had to happen in terms of the kids and them being able to carry on with schooling. Because of course by now they're a bit older. I think Sheridan was about 8 and Flynn was about 12 or 11. So, their schooling was a bit more of a big deal at that stage, but still doable. So I think I ended up getting somebody to come in and watch them who was a local, which was very helpful. And one day a week they went and visited some of the locals who were very happy to help. I mean, the Karikari community is just so supportive anyway of the artists that visit there. And so that part worked really well in the end. And other than that, I just worked in the evenings and because the studio space that they have set up for the artists is right next to the house. And so it's really easy. And I think the beauty of the being in Karikari was the fact that we were just, it's a beautiful old house and it's right near the beach. So you can walk down to the beach. And the more I stayed there and, lived there, the more I realized actually the experience is in being outdoors and experiencing the beach and the sea and the West Coast in all its beauty and actually walking along the dunes and so I took lots of photos while I was out there, and I took photos of the kids there and all of us in the environment really, and it was I think that was the most the precious part of being there was just the ease of being able to do that and gather all this imagery. But the studio space was so big, and the big wall that was there allowed me it was probably the biggest works that I'd made on paper I made at the residency, and because of this huge wall, and I just taped up my big pieces of paper, and I just felt so inspired by the wildness of the West, the West Coast. I don't know if you call it West Coast because it's still, I always refer the West Coast as South Island, isn't it? Or is it still the West Coast?
I think we think of ourselves as West Coast.
Oh, you do?
West Coasters.
West Coast, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's just the difference in the black sand and the wild weather and the waves and all
power.
those things, that kind of combine in the environment. And so and I think one of the days while we were at the residency, we went, is it Mercer Bay?
I don't know.
Just next to Karikari, there's a beach that you can only access at certain times because of the tide. And it's really beautiful in terms of it just feels untouched because you can't access it very easily. And so I think you can get there along the cliffs and down a rope ladder or something.
Really?
Like that. It's not easy. It's not
Wow.
easy. And so I'd heard about it by one of the artists who'd been there before. And I was like, okay, well, if we can. And then there was this king tide. And so the tide went out and we could all go for this walk. And there's these caves that you can walk through. And so I was really inspired by those. And I did this big work with these kind of really rugged cliff faces and these, sweeping kind of rock surfaces and, just very abstract works. And I probably did the most landscapes while I was, making work inspired by Karikari, which makes sense, I suppose. But definitely brought in those kind of figures, but very, very minimalist figures, very kind of pared back, and it was a really cool opportunity and really awesome experience. And
and it's so lovely that it can influence your work in some way, just where you're placing yourself.
I definitely think that it brought home how important the natural environment around me was in terms of feeling like I was connected with, in terms of my, feeling like I was slowing down enough and contemplative enough to be making the work that I wanted to make, but also just having that time in the natural environment for me. It brings elements to the work that I find is interesting. So I did a series of works that were very gestural in the background because I felt like feeling that you got from the rock faces that you were standing beside, or the feeling that you got when you saw this expanse of black sand at Karikari, and those kind of emotions that you feel that you can't quite pinpoint what they are, or you can't, they're not easy to define, but they're part of how you're experiencing a place.
Yeah.
And so that was quite, so I did that series that linked to those. After I think it was a printmaking show that I did, and linked it to that. It was interesting to be able to think through those things and bring it into the work.
Yeah, I think that the West Coast, the power of the West Coast, and the black sand, as you say, and the weather and the formations out here, it is really powerful. I mean, Muriwai is north of Karikari, but very similar in ways. And there's more than 60 visual artists in Muriwai, and there's only about 1,500 people, or 1,000 to 1,500.
Yeah,
it's a very small community, but there are a lot of visual artists, and then there's a lot of other artists like filmmakers and designers and creative people, and it's something about this place that brings something out of you. And it's, some artists are responding quite literally to the landscape, and some more sort of subconsciously, but it is very powerful.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to hear about the Silo 6 exhibitions that you've done. You've done a couple of those, haven't you? So 2020 was Dust and Scratches, which was with 2 other artists.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Silo 6, for those who don't know, could you just explain what that is?
Wynyard Quarter, there's Silo Park, which includes the silos and the area around it. I think it's called Silo Park there. It's these silos, I think it's a group of 6 silos, which are, I think, historical in that they used to be used for bringing, I can't actually remember the exact details about it, but it was a way of storing grain or something else. I can't remember. Yeah, it may have been grain.
I feel like it was grain.
Yeah.
So they're like massive concrete,
huge concrete
tanks.
structures. It's just this beautiful, what you can walk inside and you can walk between all the silos. There's archways between the silos. So it's this really interesting space. It feels very kind of brutalist and concrete structures and tall. The scale of it is quite impressive in terms of, you know, being able to, you look up and you can't see the top of the silos, you know, in certain lights. And so it feels very grand and you know, bigger than you. So it has that drama. Or just the space is really fascinating to visit. So if you get the opportunity, go and have a look at the space. But it was one of the spaces that were open to be used for Art Week Auckland. And like I mentioned, I'd met Melanie Arnold in the mono show that I put together. And I knew of her work, and she kind of collects ready, like objects, found objects, and she kind of elevates them in a new way so that people look at them in a different way. And I really love the works that she brings together. And at the same show, I'd met an artist called Diane Scott, she was working with aluminium and making the works that I'd seen of hers previously were sort of scratches, fine scratches or drawing into aluminium, and really interesting works. And I just thought it would be really cool to bring those 2 artists together and myself together, because we all worked quite differently, but it was something about our works that felt like it could be really interesting brought together. And I contacted them and we talked about it. And in that same time, I saw something come through for Art Week Auckland and realized that this was one of the spaces. And I was like, yeah, if we could get this space, because all of our work had that kind of gritty feel. It was, you know, that felt like it would work really well in a space like the silos. The silos the walls are pitted with, you know, history, and they've got paint marks and sort of numbers spray painted into them from, you know, what they were before. And it just is a space that has so much history in it already and so much character. So yeah, we had to do it really quickly. It was kind of a weird time. It was over lockdown, and so they weren't even sure if Art Week was going to go ahead, but we put forward a proposal anyway, and got accepted. And so we had to put a show together with the idea that it might get cancelled. Also, we had to put together a show with the idea that you could only let like one person in at a time, or we had to put through, you know, like different scenarios. So it was a complex mix. But yeah, it was just such an inspiring space to work in that we just basically retreated back to our studios once again and made work with the knowledge of where we were going to be putting it. So we did it for a couple of visits and looked at the space and just felt excited about it. So we were all on board and then we had to put the show together and to do that, it was, you know, that space has its own set of challenges. You can't actually do anything on the walls. So you can't paint on the walls or put any sort of what I call nails or things into the walls. So you have to work with those things. I basically did paintings on sheets of polythene plastic that I could stick to the walls. So I knew that with like a spray adhesive, you can stick polythene plastic to the wall. It'll stay there. And when it gets taken off, it's like a sticker. It doesn't leave any residue.
Well, that's good to know. That's interesting. So you can stick it onto concrete.
Yeah, with the right spray adhesive. I don't know. And what was interesting about it is because the polythene plastic was clear, you couldn't see the.
That's a brilliant idea.
You couldn't see it, and so it looked like I was actually. So many people who came to the show thought I'd painted onto the walls, and they're like, "How are you going to get it off?" And I'm like, well,
that is very clever.
So that was an interesting kind of. That was an interesting thing to discover, that I could paint on the polythene plastic without it doing anything weird. And
did it feel similar to you? Sorry.
Yeah, well, because of the monotypes, it was actually really similar. And the scale of it was so different for me. And so that was exciting. And so Melanie brought in these really cool, huge works, which she suspended from the grain kind of, I don't know what they're called, but they're like these structures that sit in some of the silos that would have released the grain. And so she attached her sculpture, I'm going to call them sculptures because it's quite hard to define, and she attached it so it was hanging from these. And then she had some smaller works which were like they originally were a melted ladder, and there were bits of aluminium that had been kind of warped and into these almost like mini sculptures. And so she arranged those on plinths that she had made. Diane did these drawings, which were quite, geometric but on huge pieces of paper. And she works with sculpture as well, so they felt quite sculptural in their own way. So all the works were very different from each other, and they were really interesting. Together, they worked well in the space, and so the whole show came together really beautifully. And yeah, we were happy with how it all came together. And for Art Week, it was really interesting because there was an opening night that was the official opening night, and people kind of moved from space to space on cycles and bicycles and stuff, and probably bikes, not bicycles. I don't know. And so for opening night, we had a group of sound artists, experimental sound artists in the space, and they had somebody who came in doing laser show with light and cast it up into the silos, and so with the music and the sound, and the whole space felt very eerie and kind of interesting, and so people were drawn off the street just to come into the space, and then they got to experience the art and the music and the light. So it all came together really beautifully on opening night, and so it was one of those rewarding shows. That
sounds incredible. And it's so interesting, isn't it, that you were influenced by that place that you were going to end up putting your work into, and then at the residency you were sort of influenced by the space that you were actually creating within.
Yes.
It's so interesting how place can really influence what you do.
Yeah.
As an artist.
Yeah, it is important, and I think it's one of those things that you can bring into the work, or it's not.
You don't have to.
It doesn't necessarily happen automatically, but sometimes it's so dominant in terms of where you are or what you're doing that it just becomes part of the work.
Yeah. And over the years, you have submitted your works into various awards, And one of my favourites, which I was talking to you about earlier, is from Estuary Artworks in 2013, a long time ago, 11 years ago. And that was called The Turn of the Tide, which we're not really going to go into, but you won that that award. Yeah. And that work, if you're listening, which I presume you are, listeners, you should look into that. The Turn of the Tide by Belinda Griffiths is, I think, the most stunning, gorgeous piece of work that really speaks to me for some reason. I don't know if it's the sea or I presume it's the sea that he's standing in, but it's really beautiful. So you have won quite a few awards along the way. And then you also were highly commended in 2021 at the Parkins Drawing Prize for a large-scale work on plastic. How do you feel about entering art awards?
I think they're really they're one of those things, but like proposals, you enter them and you've got to be kind of quite you've got to hold on to that quite loosely because they're like entering a lottery in a lot of ways because, it's so subjective. Artists and judges, will ultimately choose the works that they connect with. And so you've got to go in knowing that that's just the reality of it. But I think from early on, I started entering art awards because I liked the idea of putting my work in front of people, but also in front of judges, putting work in for things and getting some feedback back from them is really important in the journey of an artist. And I've done it many times over the years for different types of awards as well. It's, I think my first one that I put work into was the Franklin Arts Festival. Happens every year, and they've been doing it for years. So it was years and years ago. It was probably while I was still working as a graphic designer, and that was the first award I won, was actually at the Franklin Arts Festival, and it was for a still life of apples, which is quite interesting to think back on. It was so early on in my art career, but just that, winning that was just a really important step in being affirmed as an artist and actually encouraging me to keep going as an artist. So it's those sorts of things and those small steps that can help you in the journey, that we take as artists, because there's a lot of setbacks, but then there's those wins and all those kind of steps forward. And even if it's not a win or a highly commended or a merit prize or anything, getting accepted for some of these awards is enough that you go, yes, okay, I've gotten the work in front of people and I'm getting the work in front of judges, and I might get some feedback about it, and those sort of things are important in the scheme of it all.
You are represented by Fonanda Galleries in Auckland and Solander Gallery in Wellington, and also Gallery 33 in Wanaka, which is a lovely spread across the two islands of New Zealand. And you've had quite a couple of solo shows.
Yeah, I think I've had three solo shows and a couple of two-person shows with Fonanda. Just, lovely to deal with. And really,
I only hear good things about that gallery.
Just lovely people.
Yeah. And Solander, was that around the same time?
Yeah, it was actually quite a similar time. Paulette and Vincent, they run Solander Gallery, and their works on paper. A lot of the works that they sell are prints and works on paper, and so I think they had seen my monotypes and were interested in showing those, and so they contacted me. And I think it's quite a big gallery, and so I've had sort of two-person shows there with them, and always works on paper. sometimes they do shows where it's works on board, but it's interesting because they've got a real following of people who buy works on paper from them, and they've been going for a number of years. And so, yeah, people know them as a gallery for works on paper. And they've got some really interesting printmaking artists. So, yeah, it's always great to go along to shows where you see printmaking in the vast array of printmaking that you can get.
And it's interesting that printmaking is probably not really at the forefront in New Zealand art, is it, for some reason? I mean, for example, I don't think I've spoken to a printmaker. Just there's not as many people using printmaking as one of their mediums, would you say? Yeah,
I think that there are some really interesting printmakers in New Zealand for sure, and but yeah, possibly a different that they had. There's a print council New Zealand, they're a real community in themselves, and so you probably will meet one printmaker, and then you'll be able to meet a whole lot of printmakers because they're all connected.
Yeah,
just doing really interesting things, and So with Solander, I can't remember the year. It was a few years ago. We went to Sydney Contemporary because Sydney Contemporary is a massive, art fair, a bit like Aotearoa Art Fair, but it's also includes a paper section, paper and printmaking, and so they invited me over with my work, and also John and a few other artists, and so we got to show there with them, with Solander Gallery, and it was. I just found that so interesting because I could wander around and see all these new artists, these Australian artists, because it's just, you see, you get to experience New Zealand artists and get to know them, but it's always interesting to be introduced to new artists.
Yeah. Would you like to have a gallery in Australia or somewhere else in the world?
I wouldn't mind. I do find it hard sending your work off and not necessarily being able to see it up and
and packaging is so expensive, isn't it, from here?
Yeah, probably. I have sent a few works over, but it's a whole nother ball game. It's
lovely that you are in that position where your work is valued so much that galleries are just coming to you.
I'm very fortunate, actually.
Yeah, I don't think it's fortune. So as we said, you are represented by Gallery 33 in Wanaka, and you have a show coming up July the 5th to the 26th, 2024, and that's with artists Simon Kahn and John Oxborough. Can you tell us about that show?
Yeah, I am working on pieces right now as we speak. I've never shown with Simon and John before, so that'll be a really cool experience. I know of both their work, but yeah, that'll be really cool. I'm working on 6 pieces, and I'm at various stages of completion at the moment. But I'm just continuing some of the works that I did for. I've done a recent show which finished at Phonander last month, and I did a series of works of a figure walking in a kind of indistinct kind of landscape, and I really wanted to continue those works because they have a new technique which I brought in, which kind of gives a hint of a background, but nothing that is concrete, nothing that sort of places the figure in any particular environment. And I really like that kind of nondescript space that a figure finds themselves in. It's almost like it's in a landscape rather than a real landscape. And so I'm going to explore that a bit more, and probably some close-ups of faces, a bit of a mix. So 6 works all up for that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, you're a very, very busy person, which is why we've needed nearly 2 hours to speak. And we've decided that we're not going to do the questions, listeners. I hope you don't mind. But we have kind of covered those anyway.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to ask you one little cheeky question. Where can you see your work going in the future?
I think that I can only know that through getting back into the studio and
right.
making.
Yeah.
I can't,
It's hard to
and
predict.
then you discover something and you go, oh, this would be interesting if I,
Yeah.
put it into this environment, or this would be really interesting if I changed it up and put it on this surface. And that's when by doing.
And by experimenting when you're not quite sure what you're going to actually discover.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we might have to finish, but thank you so much. I just wanted to keep talking to you because you're so interesting. I've so enjoyed our conversation and meeting you, Belinda. Thank you very much for being on the podcast. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to actually really dive into your work. And I look forward to owning one day.
Thank you for having me here, Mandy. It's just I'm a long time listener of your podcast, so it's awesome to meet you and to just be in here in your space, in your garden, and talking to you.
Thank you. Putting a name to the face, a face to the voice.
Yeah.